My name is Mark Billingsley. I'm a Shelby County Commissioner in District 4. District 4 covers South Cordova, Germantown, Southwind, and Windyke.
Mark, thanks for coming today. Why do you want to be the District Commissioner, County Commissioner?
Well, I've been the Shelby County Commissioner for the last 5 years. I had the privilege of being appointed 5 years ago. There was a crowded race of individuals who wanted the seat. At the time,
whose seat was it?
Wyatt Bunker was my predecessor. He ran for mayor of Lakeland and won, which opened up the seat. There were about 15 people that were interested in the seat. We all threw our names in the hat, and I had the privilege of being selected. Was in the seat as an appointee for about a year, and then I ran for office 4 years ago and successfully won. I'm a Republican commissioner.
What did you do before you were on the county commission? What's your work experience?
I've got a lot of experience. First in public service. For a number of years I was a volunteer policeman in the city of Germantown where I live. After I was a volunteer policeman for several years, I thought about sort of expanding my leadership a little bit and became an alderman in the city of Germantown, basically a city councilman for the city of Germantown. I also served as a vice mayor in the city of Germantown. I've always been active in my community, even as a kid, and sort of aspired to public service. I've spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector. I really began professionally in nonprofit when I was the Director of Development and Marketing for United Cerebral Palsy, where I stayed for 7 years. After that, I had the opportunity to become an executive director, which had always been my goal as a young man, to run my own nonprofit. So I became the executive director of the Memphis Area Home Builders and really grew that position over 7 years. At one time I represented the interests of 32,000 people in the building trades. It was quite a wonderful opportunity. And then I started having, my wife and I, who've been married 17 years, started having babies and wanted to settle down and travel less. So I had the opportunity to become Director of Development for Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare and their foundation. I was the major gift officer for Methodist Le Bonheur for 10 years, a job I really enjoyed. But again, God sort of opened up another opportunity, and after 10 years at Methodist Le Bonheur, I'm now presently Vice President of Christian Brothers University. I am the Vice President of Advancement. So basically I build donor relationships and work with alumni.
Why did you want to be on the county commission in the first place?
To serve. My heart is service. I started helping, I'm a native Memphian. I started helping in my community as a kid. When I was 15 years old, I literally started food and clothing drives for the poor. I grew up over next to Treadwell High School. My parents were very average, good people. My dad was a barber, had a barber shop over at Sears Crosstown. My mom was a secretary at the University of Memphis. They worked really, really hard to put me through school, and I always have just had this sense of service in my heart. So really from 15 years of age to now 51 years of age, it's been about serving. It's not necessarily about the political part of it. I don't know that I'm really much of a politician, if that makes any sense, but I'm about service. And I think for those of us that are called to be in public service, it's important to offer yourself up if you're willing to make the sacrifice.
In terms of service in the areas you serve, particularly Southwind, Windyke, as well as South Cordova, what are the key issues there? What are the biggest challenges, your constituent challenges, if you will?
Well, in South Cordova, to be very candid, services are a problem. Almost every day I get a phone call regarding trash pickup in South Cordova. There are some crime issues in South Cordova. We have a very good Shelby County Sheriff's Department that does a good job collaborating with the Memphis Police Department. I would say public safety in South Cordova, as well as trash pickup, which is the most basic service that citizens should be able to get. I know right now the city of Memphis is undergoing a tremendous issue with the current trash provider. I know because I talked to Public Works Director frequently that they're doing the best to correct that problem. In Southwind, there is a great desire for Southwind to de-annex. That is top issue, same way at Windike. Their perception of new services that they received after they were annexed was insignificant, and they would like to de-annex. I support that. A lot of good people in my district, from South Cordova to Germantown to Southwind to Windike. I mean, just tremendous amount of really good people.
Are parts of your district in the city and parts outside the city?
That's correct.
So does that create a difficulty for you in trying to represent sort of two constituencies there?
No, sir. I think the expectations are different. In South Cordova, they would just really like to get their trash picked up, quite frankly.
Basics. Huh?
It's the basics. In Germantown, being a former alderman there, a former policeman, people in Germantown can expect a policeman or a fire truck or an ambulance at their door in 3.5 minutes. That is amazing, quite frankly. Southwind, formerly before de-annexation, had the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. Now they have Memphis Police Department. Memphis Police Department is stretched. I mean, they are very stretched. I mean, because of the size of the service area that the city of Memphis covers, I mean, they are stretched to the bone. I mean, we need more law enforcement on the streets. As a county commissioner, for the last great number of years, I have chaired law enforcement corrections and courts. I've championed efforts to put more law enforcement officers on the street in collaboration with the city of Memphis. We've done that successfully. We added 25 deputies just the previous budget, and to specifically put them in the city of Memphis. In collaboration, we just added another 30 deputies with the budget that was just approved a few days ago. So expectation of service is certainly very important to me and my constituents, as well as public safety. I think public safety, no matter where you are in Shelby County, it's a top issue, if not the issue.
So what are you doing to help improve that? And what do you do as one of several trustees, right? I'm relatively new to the area.
Oh, I understand.
Still learning the lingo. What are you able to do? I mean, how can you push that forward?
Well, it's a great question. What can I do to help with public safety? Well, one of the things is providing leadership. I've made a commitment for the last couple of years to stay committed as the chairman of the Law Enforcement Committee, Law Enforcement Corrections and Courts Committee. I work directly with the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. My experience with them has been very, very good. Also, my experiences with the police director in the city of Memphis has been very good. I think we do have an influence. For example, when we proposed the idea a year ago of putting more deputies on the street specifically to help supplement the city of Memphis, that was a pretty significant initiative. Not every group would have championed that. Some people could have said, well, if you're going to add more deputies, just put them in Shelby County. But I have the mindset that there goes Memphis, there goes every other part of the city. You can't disconnect. If you're in Germantown, you can't live in a little utopia here. If you're in a great part of Cordova over here, I mean, I believe that we're all in it together. The other thing I've done on law enforcement is we are either going to invest on the front end or we're going to invest on the back end. And when I say that, I've spent too many hours out on Mullen Station at the Corrections Center, where we're spending over $70 a day to incarcerate individuals. I've championed initiatives to keep children out of the juvenile justice system. That is where we have to start. I've championed initiatives like JIF, Juvenile Interfaith, I'm going to mess up the words, but JIF, it's a nonprofit here not far from the Commercial Appeal. Those are young men who are gang members. They've committed 3 to 5 serious crimes, and at JIF, which is a nonprofit, they try to change their hearts and minds. I championed money for an evening reporting center there where the kids from JIF are picked up in a van after school. They come to JIF for tutoring, mentoring, they get a meal, they have physical education, they get help with their homework, and then at 8 o'clock at night, they go home to mom and dad. The part that bothers me and what we've got to fight in public safety is some of the kids that are being incarcerated at a very young age, guess what? They go home. One young man I know goes home to 2 active gang members who are their parents. Mom and dad are gang members. In our system here in Shelby County, there are very little resources to take that kid out of that situation into a better situation. Also in the area of improving public safety, I've traveled to Miami-Dade County with 10 other leaders from school systems, law enforcement, public defender's office, to look at a new system of a juvenile assessment center, which would be addressing the problems at the front end. We've got to do that. Some of these kids are making errors, right? I'm not necessarily very understanding of violent crime. I think when you commit a violent crime, you should pay the price for that. You need to, you need to serve your time for that. But we've got a lot of young people that get on the slippery slope into the juvenile justice center, and it's almost like quicksand for them and their parents. They will never get out of that. In Miami-Dade County, they've decreased juvenile arrests by 70%. But you know how? They have invested in mental health support for children, decreasing abuse of children, providing appropriate counseling when a kid isn't showing up. Unless the numbers have changed drastically from like a year ago, in Memphis and Shelby County, we have 22,000 kids that don't arrive on the first day of school. Now that ought to trouble all of us. And honestly, some of those remedies of better supportive education also helps the public safety issue for all of us.
What are some other accomplishments you've had as a county commissioner for your district?
Well, gosh, when I came out of the chute, I mean, literally probably weeks into my tenure on the county commission after being elected, I championed the ability for citizens to be heard. I really believe that I've even been a champion for the media to be heard and to have open access to what's going on. Now there's a rule that was passed thanks to my sponsorship that before, during, or after a county commission meeting, citizens get the opportunity to speak. In different municipalities I hear of challenges where people say, well, we only hear from citizens at this time, or you've got to be there by a certain time. At the county commission, I'm very proud that the doors are open. I think that rule helped quite a bit. One of my campaign slogans 4 years ago was to restore credibility to the Shelby County Commission. That's not entirely because of me, but I think I've been a collaborative leader. If you're Democrat, Republican, unfortunately, county politics are partisan. If you run for a county office, you have to choose if you're going to be Republican or Democrat. But most of the issues are honestly good choices or bad choices. When you talk about public safety, education, economic development, health care, yeah, there's some gray area in there, but lots of times you have to choose, are you going to make the investment? Just like I've made the choice when I see opportunities for children. Do I want to pay for it, representing all of our citizens on the front end, or do I want to pay for it on the back end? I think I've been very much a collaborative leader. I've certainly been supportive of the current mayor, Mark Luttrell. I'm not a disruptor, quite frankly. I don't know that our job in elected office is necessarily to be a disruptor. I've been honest and open. I don't always agree with every decision everybody makes, but I try to do it fairly. I don't personally attack people. I think we've sort of lost decorum at all levels of public service. I never want to be that person because I'm about service. I'm here to serve. I'll give you another example. I think a lot about me and what I've given thus far is about transparency. When we did a disparity study, the citizens of Shelby County paid well over $300,000 for that disparity study to see how we were spending our money. Was it going toward minority business enterprises? Well, guess what? That study showed we only spent 5% of our spend with minority and business enterprises. when that study first came out, there was a push for the public not to see it. Ironically, probably two people that are politically on different spectrums, Walter Bailey, who served as county commissioner for over 40 years, and me, a new guy, we both worked together, and we said, this study was done with public dollars, and everybody should be able to see it, including the newspaper and the citizens. Why would you do a study and then delay it and disseminate it without everybody seeing it at the same time? So we championed that. We were able to get the study out appropriately to everybody so they could make their own judgments. So I would say what I've most given is a sense of transparency, fairness, bipartisan leadership. Even though I am a Republican, I'm not apologizing for that, because I do have conservative values. I care about where our dollars are spent. You know, we have not raised taxes since I've been elected, and we've been able to fund education and public safety issues and economic development while also decreasing people's taxes. So I'm proud of that as a Republican. But as a leader, I also recognize, guess what? Not everybody lives in my district. My district probably has more country clubs than any other district. Whereas if I go to another area of Memphis and go with one of my colleagues on the commission, which I do often, we have kids in Memphis that have not left a 10-block square radius of their home. Now, some people won't believe that, but that is the truth. And you just have to talk to some of the kids that live in North or South Memphis that are in a gang. Some kids in this county have never seen Shelby Farms. They've never seen the river. And again, for most of the people in my district, it's hard for them to imagine that. But that's the reality of the level of poverty we're dealing with in Memphis and Shelby County.
Let's talk a little bit about economic development. There's
Sure.
been a lot of talk and a lot of controversy over tax incentives, the Edge Board, and so on and so forth. What's your feeling about the use of tax incentives? Are we doing the right thing? Is the Edge Board properly representing all facets of the community?
I think it's very difficult. I think Reed Dolenberger, who's the executive director of Edge, what a difficult job to be in that that leader, whoever that person is, has to answer to two mayors. They don't necessarily, that position doesn't necessarily answer to a board of directors. I mean, every CEO that I've ever met, being a former CEO of a nonprofit, you answer to the board of directors. That is not the way Edge is set up. You don't answer to the board. You're giving tax incentives. You don't necessarily answer to the city council or the county commission. I personally think it's not set up for success from an organizational standpoint. I have not gone on the attack on Edge. Some people are trying to dismantle it. I don't know that I'm at the point where I think it needs to be dismantled, but I think we need to have an honest, comprehensive discussion about incentives. We need to better educate the public to incentives and how we've got to be competitive. I'm very encouraged that Richard Smith with Federal Express is the current leader of the Chamber of Commerce. I think he and his father have shown tremendous leadership, as do all the executives and the team at Federal Express. I mean, without FedEx, I mean, Memphis wouldn't be what it is. It's encouraging to see someone of his caliber at the Chamber. I think we've got to look to the Chamber and government and other entities. I mean, look at the School of Business at area universities. From where I work at Christian Brothers University to University of Memphis, let's bring in the best and the brightest to rethink how we're competing. You know, it's ironic that we very rarely talk to the top 25 employers in this county to have an honest conversation. I think most approaches on that right now have been, well, let's just implode it. Well, we know in our current day right here today, just imploding something for the purpose of imploding it is not a great idea unless you have a plan. I just think we need to revisit it and see how we're competing. You know, the world is changing with technology now on a daily basis, hour by hour. I mean, we're seeing that. Even this interview today is being taped. 4 years ago, this wouldn't be taped. Someone would be transcribing it and retyping it. So I think we've got to take a new look at how we compete. because it's concerning to me that we're not growing.
Just taking the whole issue of economic development a little further,
Sure.
because you've talked about the grinding poverty, and it's particularly evident in North and South Memphis.
Absolutely.
Midtown, downtown, out east into Germantown, Collierville, booming,
Right.
relatively, compared to those areas. So how can you, or what ideas do you have of how to get more development seeded in those areas, which have huge needs, huge poverty, huge unemployment?
You know, I think we've seen some pockets of success where, you know, not far from St. Jude, I don't know what the development is, but at one time when I was executive director of the home builders, we went into that area. You had people with means living with fair housing, with people that had limited income. I think in lots of cities you see that, and it works well, where it's somewhat of a hybrid. If you know the people's hearts in Memphis, which I believe I know lots of them, I think there's more and more people open to that idea if we have the housing available. Right now, again, even though I've been out of the housing specter for well over a decade, you know, there's limited lots here. There's limited opportunities. There's very few available lots right now to even build on. But I think thinking outside the box, again, to have affordable housing that's somewhat blended or a hybrid, I think is appealing to some individuals. We've seen that. You see that in other cities, and I don't know why you couldn't do that here. I think you know, the crux of all this is, your point is poverty. And so I've been a champion of increasing the capacity of minority business enterprises. I think, quite frankly, it's very, very, very disappointing to me that our own county government did a 5% spend with minority business enterprises. And even though we do have, I think there's 800 minority business enterprises right now, but guess what? They have one employee. That is not necessarily being very vibrant as an African American business. I mean, I know there's African American businesses that want to have a number of employees, and guess what? If you can employ a number of employees, it raises the bar on their ability to make a house note, to have affordable health care, to have some choices. I've been a big champion of that. But I think we've got to provide the resources. I've seen a good push for MBEs. Lately, there was a recent announcement about First Tennessee and some other banks putting in $15 million for loans. Our community needs economic justice, in my opinion. And we're not seeing a lot of that. It was great that we celebrated Dr. King, and I was at many events with that. But during that week, which is pretty powerful, you know, I had friends coming in from California and all over the country that came in for MLK. In many ways, I could see how far we've come, but boy, we have a long way to go. And so much of this, to me, is about economic justice, and it's about education. I was with Superintendent Hobson the other day with the school budget meeting. We've got schools where we have sixth graders reading at a second grade education. Now, how do you transform from that situation to what you talked about, affordable housing and having the means? Well, you've got to start. I've also championed pre-K. I championed additional dollars for poor relief a year ago, you know, put more pre-K dollars in. And the Board of Commissioners supported pre-K again. This stuff is not going to be fixed overnight, but boy, you've got to start. Number one, you got to start with the kids that are being born now, and then for the adults that are somewhat really lagging out there, really suffering, we've got to provide the additional support for them to be more successful. I've never met anybody who said, I didn't want to have a job, I don't want to be successful. About 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to interview about 7 gang members. They were 15 years old and right around that age. And when I sat in the room with a bunch of gang members, this was over at GIF, I asked the gang members, if I could do anything for you, what could I do for you? And I never could imagine what their answer would be. I mean, I just had no idea what they would say to me. And what juvenile gang members said to me was, Mark, if I could get a job on the weekends, if I could get a job in the summer, Anytime I'm off from school, if I could get a job, I could turn my life around. Now that's from the mouth of gang members in Memphis. I think some of these kids are get without hope. There's nobody to really care for them. We have a tremendous lack of mentors in this community. There's lots of groups that are trying to get more mentors. But because if you don't sort of start at the foundation, how do you fix, to your question, how do you fix the housing issue? How do you fix virtually everything that we're struggling with right now if we don't try to catch them early, as well as try to address some issues for the people that are 40, 50, 60 years old? You know, go ahead.
Do you think that, given all of these issues and problems that you're talking about,
Sure.
solving, going to the foundation of these problems, do you think we're set up politically, our structure is politically sound to address these problems as a whole? Because we have, you know, so many divisions: city, county, municipal, urban, rural, suburban. Should we have consolidated government? Is there a better way to do this?
It's a great question. If you would have asked me, as well as lots of other individuals 10 or 15 years ago, I think you get a resounding no from almost everybody you talk to. I mean, people, since I've represented the home building industry for a long time, have been a huge battle. Now, in listening to constituents from Germantown to Cordova to Southwind to North and South Memphis, and I meet with lots of people. I mean, I've met with everybody from the gang member to the president of Federal Express. And I'm hearing more and more conversations from regular citizens who say, shouldn't we go ahead and consolidate? Shouldn't we go ahead and consider it? You know, the biggest gap in consolidation was the schools, right? And now that we've got charter schools that are working well, we have municipal schools that are working well, SCS is doing its very best to try to address the issues. There's still a long way to go. Some of that is limited by the children that have very little support at home. But our schools were the big crux of the lack of consolidation. I foresee I don't think it'll be during my term, because I've only got 4 years left in county government since I've already served a term. I don't necessarily see consolidation during my tenure, but I certainly see it during my lifetime if businesses choose to get there, because I think you're going to have to listen to business leaders who say, to your point, we're not cooperating. It's too difficult. I mean, I've known businesses who've chosen to leave this area to go to other areas because it's just, time is money to businesses, and it takes too much time here to get anything accomplished. So I think we could always work better. It's interesting that recently, and maybe we've met once or twice in 4 years, but it was really interesting recently when the city council and the county commission met. We met down at the Riverwalk or something downtown, and it was like breaking news. City council and county commissioners get together for a meeting. It was like everybody was almost giddy. You know, the reporters were giddy, people in the room were giddy. We should be meeting much more frequently, including our municipal mayors. I know that our mayors get together. You know, Mayor Luttrell gets together with all the municipal mayors, but there's a great body of individuals that serve in public service. We should probably convene much more frequently and have a community conversation. I know I would be open to that. I've proposed a couple times having county commission meetings actually not downtown, but take them out into the 13 districts. I think with whoever the next county commission chairman is, that'll be something I push again, and I think we're open to that. Sometimes it's difficult because you're conducting a tremendous amount of business with county employees, so it would be difficult to go out, but I think we've got to get out more. But to answer your question, I think that choice will be on the table in the coming years, if not sooner. I'm not a fortune teller, but between, you know, it wouldn't take much for our police departments and sheriff's departments are already working really closely together. Same way with the fire department. So a lot of the barriers to that are gone.
Speaking of the next county commission, at least 7 members are going to be new, so you have at least a majority brand new.
I think it's 8, isn't it?
Well,
I think it's 8.
Now, I lost count, but
yeah, I think it's 8.
is going to be new, which presents an opportunity and a challenge, I would guess.
It does.
What do you think are the top 2 or 3 issues the next county commission is going to have to tackle? What would you like to see the next county commission?
Well, it's going to be some heavy lifting. I believe there's going to be 5 of us returning. I anticipate I will be the only Republican returning commissioner, because there's no one else returning or running for office. It's a current incumbent on the Republican side. There'll be 4 Democrats returning that I'm friends with. It's going to pose some challenges. I think the people running seem to be very engaged individuals, well educated. From what I've seen of the 8 that are the total new 8 individuals, the biggest challenges I see are a couple huge things: is reconsideration of the long-term viability of the med. We just budgeted $500,000 to study healthcare in Shelby County to see what that means, because the Region 1 is getting very close to tremendous capital needs. I don't know the numbers, but it could easily be $300–400 million for a new hospital. But the way things have changed with the location, you've got Methodist Le Bonheur, who is downtown. They've become somewhat of a choice for poor people as well as people with private insurance. So you've got Methodist Le Bonheur downtown, you have Region 1 downtown, Baptist is out east, you have some St. Francis is on Poplar and Bartlett. I think we have to, and Commissioner Milton has actually championed having the $500,000 study to really have a comprehensive look at health care. I think we've got to see what the needs are, where people are making choices. I'm not saying that we won't build a new med, but I think there'll be very serious consideration of how that looks. Does that mean the med singly becomes exclusively a trauma center and someone else takes care of neonate, or does it become a trauma center and the burn center and some of the other things splinter off? I think there'll be some very good conversation around that. And I've joined Commissioner Milton in supporting that expense, but to have a very unpolitical, if it's possible, conversation about health care. This body was different. We supported the expansion of Medicaid, Democrats and Republicans. I'm a person that did that. The legislature failed us on that, as you may know. We've got people in my district that are working at Kroger and other retail outlets that are far beyond retirement, trying to get money for their health care needs and medicine needs. So health care is going to be a big issue. I think we've got to get our hands around crime. I think Mayor Strickland is doing a very good job. I think Mayor Luttrell, being a former sheriff and a county mayor, has done a good job. County commissioners are very concerned about it. We've shown it. City council's actively engaged. Worth Morgan, and who's my counterpart on the city side as it relates to public safety, we've got to get a handle on it. I think a lot of that goes to, again, dealing with juveniles. Auto burglaries were recently up by 800%. That was because of juveniles. And guess what? They picked up, I forgot, hundreds and hundreds of guns in cars that were stolen. That's concerning. So healthcare is going to be a big deal. Public safety is going to be a significant deal. To your point, I think we're going to have the conversation about the age board and TIFs and our economic development strategy as it changes and evolves.
Anything else?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity.
Didn't ask you about?
No, I would just appreciate everybody's support. I think I've proven to be a really good leader, and I'd like to serve 4 more years and see what else I can contribute. And then I may go back to being a volunteer policeman again or serving on a board, but I just want to do my best for 4 more years. I've tried to do my best the last 5, and I think everybody right now in the county commission is committed that are coming back to working with the new body and us being as collaborative as possible. We need to be bridge builders and not destroyers of relationships.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great meeting.